Now, we as Lakeview have been journeying through our Lenten series, Jesus Unvarnished, where we have witnessed Jesus stepping into our shoes, embracing our vulnerabilities, and so far we have seen him tested, misunderstood, exposed, and even ignored. So today we encounter a profound and complex moment in God's story, where Jesus steps into a high-stakes, tense situation, a situation where authority is questioned and vulnerability is on full display. So the story is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, starting in verses 1 to 11. We're going to read it together. If you have Bibles, you can flip to it, but it's going to be on the screen here. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in an act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." Now, I retell this story because one way to understand this moment is as a wonderful lesson about how we should be less judgmental. How Jesus shows the religious leaders they too have sinned. Come on, you blind leaders, you've sinned too. Don't throw stones at people when they screw up, because you have also screwed up. Why are you condemning them? You've done this too. Give people grace because you too would want grace given to you, right? But what if the story is actually holding a lot more than catches the eye? What if there's actually more going on in the plot and in the setting of this story that we're just not aware of if we just read chapter 8, verses 1 to 11? Can I suggest to really grasp the meaning of what's happening here, we actually need to read before and after. Now, for time's sake, we're just going to look a little bit before. We're going to look at John chapter 7. And I'm just going to kind of explain to help us understand what is the meaning of the story. You see, in chapter 7, we have learned that the setting of the events that are happening in Jerusalem, all the things that are going on, is actually a festival of tabernacles. So here's what we need to know. The Festival of Tabernacles was the final celebration of the Jewish year. It happened in the fall, at the fall harvest, when people prayed for winter rains, because no rain meant no crops, no food, no future. And so if there's no rain, if we don't pray and God doesn't bring the blessings and the water doesn't come, our livelihood's at stake. It is in that moment, at the height of the festival, in chapter 7, that Jesus stood up and cried out. In the midst of all this loudness and all this praising and talking about water, Jesus cries out, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink." In other words, I'm the source. I'm the living water. What you're praying for, what you're looking for, I'm here. This is the backdrop of John 8. And the one key passage that we know that the religious leaders would have used and read over and over during this festival is found in Jeremiah 17. And it reads, "Lord, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust, because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of the living water." Jesus takes that teaching, takes their own words from this festival, and enacts it in silence. He writes in the dust. You see, this story isn't just about an accused woman. It's about religious leaders so consumed with power and control, they're willing to use Scripture as a weapon to accomplish their will. You see, the religious leaders take a vulnerable person who undoubtedly did something wrong. But these leaders clearly actually don't care about her sin. They actually don't care about her. What we see in their actions is how they're willing to expose, mock, and use her as cannon fodder to trap and unseat this Jesus from the position of power and authority that he's gaining. How dare he yell that he is the source of living water? This woman is simply a scapegoat. She's a scapegoat for their mission of murder. But Jesus doesn't play their game, does he? He doesn't rebuke them with passages of Scripture. He doesn't point to the law of Moses and explain how they were to care for the widows and the vulnerable and the orphans, how they were to be light to the world. He doesn't do any of that. He simply disarms this mob, restores dignity, and reminds everyone who the true source is. He does this by writing in the dust. So what does Jesus write in the dust? Maybe their names. Many theologians suggested he wrote their sins, their names. He knew them all. But I think what he's doing in the context of Jeremiah is he's revealing their power and authority of exploitation. He says, those who turn away from you will be written in the dust. After all, these spiritual leaders were part of the temple institution, right? Do we understand this? They were part of the institution that ruled the Jewish tribe, an institution that controlled politics and religion and economics and culture. This is the institution, this institution, as we read, has become corrupt. It actually doesn't care for the powerless, the thing that God reminded them to do. It ignores God's mandate to care for the vulnerable, to see the least of these. And worse than that, it uses the least, it uses the vulnerable as cannon fodder, as a scapegoat. It only cares about itself. This isn't just a story about judging others. It's about resistance, a radical refusal to participate in any system that robs people of their dignity and their worth. The cross is where the ultimate authority and the ultimate vulnerability meet. Jesus, in his authority, chooses the cross, and in his vulnerability, endures it fully. The cross becomes the center point where God's power doesn't dominate but loves, where God's strength is revealed in weakness, strong and weak.